Right, well the purpose of this really is just to update everyone on where we are with our assessment system, because I think there's different groups of teachers working on different parts of it, and we thought it would be good if we just talked about how it all fitted together. Before we do, if you could just, it might be good to remind ourselves of how we got here. So if you just cast your minds back to about a year ago, two things happened. The first thing was that we just started using the Chris Quigley Depth of Learning Tracker, and I think for some of us that was a bit of a light bulb moment, particularly in terms of what deep learning actually meant. The second thing was the Rochford Review into SEN Assessment was published, and it basically said that P-levels weren't fit for purpose, and it talked about something called levels of engagement. So what we had at that point, if you think of our range of learners in this school, they go from P1 to your greater depth Year 6 children. So that is a huge range. So what we had at that point was systems which met either end of that range, and what we needed was something which sort of refocused on those learners in the middle. And actually over the course of this year, that's been developed, again by teachers here, and what it's developed into is a system of 4 assessment pathways. Okay, and that's what we're just going to explain briefly, how each pathway works, so that everyone gets an idea of the whole system and how it fits together. And before Ali starts talking about pathway 1, I think it's really important to say as well, do you want to go to the next slide? The whole BAD ethos, the basic, advancing, deep understanding, we wanted that, we thought it was really important that we kept this ethos throughout the whole system. So the whole idea of BAD runs through each of the pathways, and you should see that as we go through each slide. Okay.
Okay, so pathway 1, as Anne said, really came from the Rochford consultation, where there was a big research and pilots about basically saying that the P-levels were not fit for purpose. We kind of already knew that, and we felt that very strongly, and for the children who were working to about P1 to P4, so in our school they are the children with the most complex needs. That's not just children with complex physical needs, that's also children with complex ASD needs as well, and communication needs. And so we were lucky enough to see Barry Carpenter actually talk to us, and he's going to come and talk to us here at this school in February. And he spoke very passionately about the foundation of learning being linked to the 7 aspects of engagement, which you can see up there. So pathway 1 really has taken those 7 aspects of engagement and it's looking at for children to work through their EHCP targets. So our most complex, or the children with the most complex needs, also have highly complex EHCPs, with lots of targets supporting all of those areas. So the idea is that we will show progress for those children, but using those aspects of engagement. And actually what we do is we will then moderate that with other sort of schools who are looking at developing that side of things as well. And evidence will be collected, lots of it will be filmed, because for some of those children the sort of small elements of progress are so tiny that actually we may have missed them. So there's lots of filming going on, lots of photos and lots of observations being collected. And everything is, progress will be measured on evidence. So we will say, yes, that has been achieved by a child when there is evidence to show that, and that gives us an element of robustness. It's just also worth pointing out that we have been selected to be a pilot school, so we'll be working with, I think, 56 other schools nationally to look at the impact of using this as a formal system of assessment. So it's quite exciting times. So within the school at the moment, the classes who are operating using Pathway 1 will be Steve's class, which is Bobcat class, Beth's class, Blue Birds, Badger class and Butterfly class. Badger is Kirsty's class and Butterfly class is Liz and Natalie's class. So there are a significant number of children, probably about 24 children, who are on this pathway. That's quite a large percentage really, considering the level of need we're talking about. So pathway 2, we really looked at because there are children who are on the Aspen Specialist Provision but also in the mainstream classes who are working at an early years level. So they might be 10, but in fact developmentally they might be operating at 8 to 20 months. And so actually what we wanted to do was look at a pathway that would allow us to use the amazing early years curriculum but actually contextualise it so it was completely appropriate for children whether they were 9, 10 years old, which we've done. And we've, in the early years curriculum, you have the ages and stages, so that's 0 to 11 months going all the way up. We've taken those out and put in Stepping Stone 1, Stepping Stone 2, so there's no reference made to age of development, it is purely a sequential skills document. And that is measured in the same way as all the others using the BAD system, so looking at basic, advancing, deepening levels of understanding. And once again, the evidence, a lot of it will be through film, lots of it through photo, teacher observations, and there may be some emerging work samples as well, which is great. So it's not. So the classes at the moment that are operating that really is Kelly's class, which is Badger class, and Joe's class, which is Puffin class. But there are also some children in the mainstream who are beginning to access that kind of approach within some of the Aspen Specialist classes. Moderation actually will be with our early years, I think. That's what we're going to try for first, and perhaps also with the Sunflower Learning Hub early years as well. And we are also going to run a early years moderation for the special schools here, where we can look at how we're comparing against other special schools.
Okay, so pathway 3 is the pebbles and the footprints. So the pebbles are the small steps before milestones. The footprints, you might not all be familiar with. They are even tinier steps which lie between each pebble, because for some children the jump from one pebble to another is just too much, and we wanted another system that would enable us to show really small steps of progress. The footprints were developed by teachers here, and they came out of our work with the 21 Steps assessment group. They asked us over a year ago now if we would start developing something, sort of pre-steps really, something that came before the 21 Steps. So that's what the footprints are, and we're using them, and actually the 21 Steps assessment group is also using them. So the children in main school, I can only think of one off the top of my head who would be on pathway 3, is in year 2. And as far as Aspen classes are concerned, pathway 3 children would be Chameleon and Eagle class. They would be on pathway 3. And teacher assessment evidence, we've got the BAD assessment running through it. Evidence will be through film, photo, observations, work samples, and there may be a small amount of formal testing as well. And moderation is with the mainstream year 1 and 2 and Kent special schools. And then finally, pathway 4, which most people should be familiar with by now, is the Chris Quigley, Pebbles and Milestones, and the majority of children in the school are on pathway 4. And this is actually where the whole BAD terminology came from in the first place. Evidence will be from the sources I mentioned before, but also there will be a lot more formal testing in this pathway that would feed into the overall teacher assessment, and moderations with mainstream schools as part of the Sunflower Learning Hub. Okay, so the Aspen Specialist Provision classes are mainly structured now in need type, which is actually reflective of pathways, apart from one, Kate's, which has a mixture of every need type in her. So, but that's where we're heading towards. That's what we want as an ideal, is that so that approach will run through, and actually we're sort of identifying the best pathway for those children so that we can show the best progress that they can make. There's always a crossover between pathways. Once you're on a pathway, you're not stuck on that pathway.
And it's been lovely actually, because we had a progress meeting recently looking at progress meetings where actually looking at how we're collecting the information, it's very clear that one child was moving quite rapidly off one pathway through how we were looking at the evidence and is ready to move on to a different pathway. And I think that's going to be key, that flexibility. We have children who have struggled for whatever reason in some of the mainstream classes, who are accessing some of the specialist provision, and actually that's enabling those children to access the right pathway for their needs. That doesn't mean to say that that might be their pathway forever. It might be a short-term intervention, or it might be that we're going to use that to collect evidence if we're going to move forward with Heiney's funding for an EHCP. We've got children on the mainstream who are operating at Pathway 2. We're starting to see, actually that's quite good evidence, isn't it, to present to get what they need. And also Pathway 1, although it is actually designed for those aspects of engagement to support children with the really complex needs, we are also using those engagement aspects to look at children in the mainstream who are not making progress because they're disengaged. So the whole foundation of Pathway 1 being there's no learning without engagement, we can take that through any class at any point and it still makes sense. So although Pathway 1 is a way of working for a group of children, it also really supports the other pathways too.
And I think it's, at this point, before we finish, it's really important to see that this is being developed by all the teachers in our school. So thank you, first of all. And although, you know, we think it's really good at the moment, it is an in-house system, so we do need somebody, you know, other people to look at it objectively from outside. So with that in mind, when Barry Carpenter comes down in February, we're going to ask him to have a really good look at it. And we've also asked some heads from other schools to have a look at it, to give us just some helpful feedback really, so that we can tweak it and make it even better.
Okay, so that is really a summary of our pathways. So
That's it.
thank you very much.
Any questions?
That's impressive, Anne.
I've never seen it so quiet.